Hi guys, and welcome back to the Average Pundits podcast, your home of all things Premier League. As always, I'm joined by Reese, and we have got a very exciting podcast today. We are joined by the Deputy Editor of Guardian Sport, Mr. Ed AARONS. How you doing, Ed?
Very good, thanks. Nice to be here. How are you?
Very good, thank you. We've been looking forward to this for quite a while. If you're regular tuners into the podcast, everyone listening, we often have guests on here talking about football and giving their opinions on what it means to be a football fan and their opinions of the club. But Reese, we've been really excited for this episode, haven't we?
Absolutely. It's not every day that you get to speak to the deputy head of a well-established news organisation. So the pleasure's all ours here at the Average Pundit. So it's great to have you here, Ed.
Well, I should point out, I'm not actually deputy sports editor. I am deputy news editor. So I just in case anyone but yeah, still I have worked there for 6 years. So, but yeah, it's a pleasure. It's I like to speak to up and coming journalists and try and help out when I can. So it's good to be here.
That's absolutely brilliant to have you on. And going into, obviously, myself and Reese, we are both journalism students at the University of Worcester. So, I mean, to start this off, it would be amazing to pick your brain a bit and talk about really what got you into journalism.
Yeah, I think, I'm quite lucky. I was talking to a teenage guy I know the other day, actually, about this. Like, I knew when I was quite young what I wanted to do, really. And it was really, to be honest, I think a lot of people are like this. I wanted to be a footballer and wasn't good enough, basically, and thought this is another good way of carrying on being involved in football without. I still I played throughout I've only just kind of stopped playing. I didn't play to a very high level or anything, but I've always loved playing it more than anything, to be honest. So that was really the root of where it came from. But over the years, I kind of got more and more interested in writing. I've always read a lot of books and stuff as well. So, and in history, I did a history degree, which was kind of designed to, to do journalism, really football journalism. That was the whole point of it. And it's really helps actually to, when you're researching for stories and especially sort of, historical things and, it gives you a good head start, I think, to do that sort of thing. So, yeah, and I've really enjoyed it so far in my career. It's quite hard. You have to work hard, but you get your rewards if you put the hours in, I think.
No, definitely. I mean, we know. I think as good as any student at the moment that the journalism kind of job market is extremely. It's difficult to break into. But I feel like it's someone like yourself. You've worked for previous organisations, the BBC and Sky. You've both had experiences with. Do you feel that this kind of other experience before building up to the Guardian now has helped you quite vastly along the way, getting experiences for loads of different organisations?
Yeah, definitely. It really helps to sort of try and, in my early career, I moved around quite a lot, and I think a lot of people do, because it's hard to get any security, to get a job, especially in these times. It's even harder now, unfortunately, but to get a job on the desk is really, like, permanent job is really tough. And it's, but the good thing is these days there are a lot of different avenues open, because when I started, it was very traditional. The internet was only really starting out, making me seem really old, and there wasn't there wasn't a pathway for young journalists to they were starting to, you could get into it through a blog eventually, but now that's really big. You can make a lot of money out of, you can have a career out of just having a blog and or a YouTube channel and things like that. So that's encouraging for sort of future generations. Yeah, but no, in terms of myself, yeah, definitely working for different organisations, and it also at Sky, I worked in TV for a couple of years, which was very interesting to see how that is different from print media, which is what I've worked in traditionally over most of my career. Yeah, it's certainly set me up for where I am now, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's amazing having someone on this who's breaking some of the most amazing, transfer stories. Definitely. I mean, around this time, it's always very exciting as a football fan, seeing, who's going where and how it's going to benefit your club. So we'll definitely build on to talk about that a little bit later. But we also know that you are a massive fan of African football, as you are the author of a book fairly recently published, Made in Africa. We'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I mean, you spent 2 years yourself in South Africa.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I went to, just after Sky, actually. I took a bit of a risk because, to be honest, I didn't really enjoy it that much at Sky, because it was just my personal opinion. This is the the other side of the glamour of sports journalism and transfers. You know, I was having to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go to start a shift at 3 a.m. and work till midday. And then, you know, people still do that. And I did it for a couple of years, but I just couldn't really handle it, to be honest. And I wanted to pursue my love of African football, really. That was one of the main reasons I left. And the World Cup in South Africa was happening. And so it was a good chance to go over there and see the first African World Cup. And then since then, I've like you say, I've continued my interest in that. And my book, Made in Africa, The History of African Players in English Football, came out on the 1st of June. So it's been really exciting couple of months just to see, you know, the reaction to people. And I think it's a story that needed to be told, really, because it's, you know, especially in the last season, the season before, we had so many influential African players. You look at Liverpool and Salah, Mane, and obviously Aubameyang at the FA Cup final last week. And it's but the book is not just about the modern generation. It's about who came before them and who kind of set the scene for them, allowed these modern players to flourish. And some of the stories, unfortunately, are not you know, that easy to read, I think, because, you know, there's a lot of racism that they had to endure and things like that. And but hopefully, it's going to bring some of those stories to light as well that people don't know a lot about.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it would be interesting to hear that kind of like backstory, because I mean a lot of it is what we know on the pitch. We tune in every week and we see these players go on the pitch and we enjoy their talents, and especially if we're fans of the club, we get to reap the benefits of the goals and the assists and everything we see, but we don't know too much about the backstory a lot of the time. So I think it's really interesting that you've been able to bring a lot of these stories to light. But Reece, we were talking just before this podcast, weren't we, about some of our favourite influential players that have played in the league that have come from the continent of Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, looking inside your book, you know, I do recommend a lot of people go. I mean, everyone, in fact, going and picking up, you know, Made in Africa. It's, you know, available anywhere you can go and buy your books wherever you can go. And one of the stories I actually found really impactful was Albert Johansen, who was the first black player to play in FA Cup history. And you give a lot of backstory of that, you know, his day there. And I mean, like, for the entire book, what was the sort of like main message that you were trying to portray releasing this book?
Yeah, really, I just wanted to explain what some of these guys like Albert, who you mentioned there, who you know, had absolutely tragic ends to his life, where he was his body wasn't discovered for 5 days in a flat in Leeds. Where in a city where he was persecuted by the police, and where he was, like, you know, where he 20 years earlier he'd been starring for their team, you know, the city's team, a very famous team, you know, in the cup final under Don Revie. And really, it just him as an example of some of the things they had to go through, and that's like right up to the modern day as well. You know, some of the stories that I think at the start of the book, I have an interview with Jurgen Klopp, and obviously Liverpool have had a heavy influence of African players, and he the way he explains it is quite good. I think is that African players have a story behind them, is the way he puts it, and it's, you know, they've had to overcome incredible odds to make it to the top. Not just even back in the day with Albert Johansen, but today with Mane, who had to travel over. You know, he ran away from home basically to become a footballer and pursue his dream, and then 10 years later wins the European Cup. You know, so I think it gives African players an edge in Europe, because they've had to fight so hard to get there, really. And that was really the main message of the book, like that it's not easy, but these guys are incredibly talented, and you know, they're making people take notice of that.
Absolutely. Definitely. And, you know, when we talk about, you know, players like Mane and those have had to come over, you know, through all these, the trials and tribulations of coming through, and they've got everything against them as well. I just wanted to actually, you know, propose this towards you. So on this podcast, we cover mainly the Premier League, and I would just like to, you know, get your opinions and try and see, who would you say are some of the best African players that have played inside of the Premier League? Maybe like a top 5 of your like preferences or like personal list of top 5 African players to have played in the Premier League?
Yeah, I've had to do this a couple of times, and I've tried to do it myself on. I think someone did it on Twitter just before my book came out. Even the top 10 is really hard.
Yes.
But in my personal ones, I think a lot of people won't remember some of these guys. But in the Premier League anyway era, it's got to be Peter Unlove. It's got to be in there. He was the first. He was from Zimbabwe, and was an absolutely brilliant player for Coventry. Scored a hat-trick at Anfield for Coventry, which sounds mad now, doesn't it? But he did. Anyway, and then so Tony Yeboah has also got to be in there for Leeds, I think. Also, I think and Lucas Radebe would have to be in there. They're both, starred for Leeds for different reasons. But like, I love strikers because that's where I used to play as a player. And Yeboah is just amazing. If you get a chance to see any of his goals on YouTube or something against Liverpool and Wimbledon, it was in like the space of like, I think it was a week or 3 or 4 days. He scored these 2 amazing goals, and everyone remembers. And it was really at the time, you have to remember there was hardly any African players in the league, and it was really made an impact. I was like sort of 14, 15 or something, and just what everyone was trying to do in the playground the next day was trying to be Yeboah. Yeah. But like, he's got to be in there for that reason. And then I think I really like all the modern players like Salah and Mane. But it's hard to ignore people like Drogba, obviously, and Yaya Toure and Riyad Mahrez as well, who was the first African to win the PFA Player of the Year, which was a big moment for African football. You think of people like Drogba never won that, or Yaya Toure never won that, which was questionable why they didn't. But now I think there's been Salah's also won it, and I think Mane was probably quite close this year, but obviously Jordan Henderson won it. So yeah, there's so many to mention. Like, it's really hard to put it in the top 5.
It's definitely hard.
Just one other one I'd like to mention, which is again probably before your guys' time and a lot of people's, but Christopher Wray, who was the first African player to win the Premier League. He played for Arsenal and was from Liberia, and he escaped from the Civil War basically. So he's a real personal player. He was only around for a few months really at Arsenal, but had quite a big impact there. So he'd have to be mentioned too.
Yeah, I mean, to come out of Liberia and a country that's so ravaged and come out and make it to the top, so some of these guys have got some absolutely incredible stories, like probably cinematic things you'd want to see on the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's and the thing is, in the book, I only had a limited amount of time. It's a snapshot of some of their stories. Like, for instance, a really early chapter, Steve McConey, who also played Coventry, but was in the 50s. I mean, you could definitely make a film out of his life because he ended up in prison in America, and just unbelievable story if you delve into it, which I did for quite a long time. Which I was working on that particular chapter for a long time. Going back to the history stuff that we were talking about at the beginning, that was really useful for like reading sources and things like that. So yeah, absolutely. There's loads there, and I think. I'm sure actually Sadio Mane's just had a film that came out. It's a documentary, which I'd really recommend. It's called Made in Senegal, which is really insightful, and it just shows you what kind of person he is as well. He's like really humble, and it's quite hard to not like Sadio Mane, even if you don't support Liverpool.
Yeah, some of these guys you just come with such a humble attitude. I mean, you when you have your favourite players, you want to think that your favorite players are humble and stuff, but when you actually see it translated on the screen, or when you see interviews and stuff, and you hear about some of the stuff they're doing behind the scenes, it always kind of, as a football fan, it's nice to hear, isn't it? It always kind of like thinks that although football's a business with so much money involved, but there are good guys that are up at the top as well, which is amazing to see.
Yeah, and these guys, I think they have African players, just to say, have an extra, they have an extra connection with where they're from, because they know they understand what is required really, and that no one else is going to do it for them. So they have to take on this role, which is quite incredible if you compare it. Not to like do down some English players and stuff, because they also give a lot of money to charity, and do lots of things for the community that don't get reported. So, but I think the African players really have this sense of like they have to give back to their communities.
Yeah, No, definitely. I think at the moment, I think some of the ones that are definitely on my radar, if you're talking current Premier League, obviously Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is obviously world class. I mean, we saw that in the FA Cup, and he absolutely incredible player. But also, I think my personal favourite at the moment, I'd love to know your opinion on this guy, would probably be Leicester's Wilfred Ndidi. I think as a player, I think he is absolutely phenomenal, and I think he's almost criminally underrated. I think if he was doing this at a Man City or a Liverpool or a United, I feel like the press and the coverage that he would get would be a lot higher. But as a a CDM, I'd like to know what you think about him.
Yeah, he's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I think he had the injury problems that he had were real reason for Leicester not quite making it, which was an amazing effort that they, even to come fifth was brilliant. But and also Pereira missing was Ricardo Pereira was big miss for them. But yeah, I think indeed it might have done Leicester a favour in that he didn't have the best end to the season, having been amazing, and even the season before he was really good. So that might, and also the current climate means that they would want a lot of money for him, and I just think he probably is going to stay. I don't know, he could move, but I agree. I think he's good enough to play at the very top level, and he's a good example of how African clubs are kind of missing out on some of the transfer fees because he was sold to Genk for not very much from Nigeria, and then it was about 18 months later that that they sold him for like 20 million euros.
Yeah.
So, Genk is a great place to develop, and he obviously did a great job with him. But that's something I touched on in the book as well. That more transfer funds of all these massive funds aren't going to the clubs that started them or the academies in Africa. They're kind of going in the European, because you have to come to Europe and get to get a big move to a big club. It's like there's a sort of pathway there that you have to follow really. So yeah, but indeed he's a really interesting example. I think Nigeria have got some great players coming through at the moment. Just seen Osimhen go to Napoli for what's close to an African record. So it's in the top sort of it's over 55 million, so not too far away.
Yeah.
So they've got a good generation coming through, and so also Samuel Chukwueze could be moving somewhere this summer. He's really exciting.
Yeah, I've seen some clips of that Chukwueze. He seems like a tricky player to play against, but Osimhen was someone I would have loved to have seen in the Premier League. But I think he'll thrive in Italy. I think he'll be a good player. Reece, did you have any favourites in the favourite African players in the Premier League at the moment?
I mean, being a Liverpool fan, you can't at the moment Salah and Mane are 100%. My favourites. But when you look back, previous years, the silky skills and fancy footwork of JJ Okocha were kind of like dazzling at the time. That he was playing in the Premier League for sure. He was amazing, and I mean, Ed, what were your sort of?
I realised I forgot to mention JJ in my. You see, that's what I mean. There's so many. He was amazing as well. I think, and this was one of the, as well as Yeboah, who I talked about earlier. It's one player that Klopp picked out because they both were. They both started. Not started, but they both played in Germany really successfully, and then came to England. Later on, but the thing about Okocha that I must say is that he was, he was more than just a showman. He was like a real leader. Sam Allardyce said that he chose him as captain because he spoke all the languages in that squad. That again, you probably don't remember in Bolton. They had all these amazing players. It was like the first time that an English club had gone that cosmopolitan, if you like, and Okocha was right at the centre of that. Yeah, so. Yeah, it's a shame to see what has happened to Bolton ever since, though. Unfortunately, he left when they got relegated, and that's it's been a real downward spiral since then.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, once these clubs from kind of yesteryear that house some of the amazing players. I mean, obviously, like Leeds as well, having some amazing players there. And we're just kind of seeing a resurgence now for Leeds. Hopefully, I think them coming up this season. We mentioned it in a couple of episodes ago. If you haven't seen that, please go check it out. But I think Leeds are going to bring in some very interesting rivalries next season. So it'll be good to see some clubs come back on the rise. But Bolton's certainly a club which got affected by the run of form, and Okocha leaving was almost the final nail in the coffin, I think. But and again, it's someone like that to have graced the Premier League. If he would have been in today's market again, I wouldn't want to think about how much he would have gone for. Obviously, with transfer fees and inflation now, I mean, I think he would have gone for quite a lot of money.
Yeah, he
But
was an African transfer record. I think when he went to PSG from Germany, I think that's right. I can't remember how much it was, but it was about 8 million or something like that. It was certainly like single figures. But yeah, now we're seeing, where Pepe is now the record African transfer. But we'll see what happens this summer. There's a few around like Koulibaly maybe. Could be he certainly is up for sale this summer. So
yeah, that's someone who I think a lot of clubs would be very interested in having in the Premier League. If Virgil van Dijk's arguably first, I mean, he's got to be. They've got to be close, haven't they? He's his playing style and his defensive attributes, I think, would slot really well into a Premier League club. And you mentioned potentially he could be potentially on for sale this year. Do you think we're talking around over 100 million? Do you think potentially a bit less or?
Yeah, I think it's about 80 million or something like that, which would be a new African transfer record because prices have come down, and also I think he's at the age where it's time to cash in on all the talk. There's been a lot of talk about him, and if he doesn't go this summer, I think that it's kind of getting a bit too old now. But he played with Mane when they were very young at Metz in France, and Koulibaly was rejected as a young, so grew up in France. He plays for Senegal, and it just shows you what you can do if you put your mind to it. He was written off as a player, but went off and proved himself. I think in Belgium as well. I think he was at Genk as well, actually, and has obviously made his name in Italy as well. Probably one of the best defenders in the world. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be. They're going to have to pay a lot of money to get somebody like that, and it's with United looking like they're going to get Sancho. It's like who's going to spend the money on the defender? Maybe Chelsea. I don't know if they have that kind of money after all the money they've already spent. So,
as a United fan, I was going to say you've seen all the rumours recently. Obviously, you yourself have been posting a lot of stuff on Twitter about it. But it's amazing to hear you say it actually on the podcast because it's a transfer that I've been extremely excited about. So it's very cool to hear that being mentioned. But if we do talk about a little bit about what we've got coming up in the summer. Obviously, like we said before, transfer window it's one of the more exciting times to be a football fan. It's very interesting to see who's going to go where, and there's a lot of stuff recently in the rumour mill which definitely has been spoke about quite a lot. And a good place to start on, I think, would be Serge Aurier. You mentioned that there are a few clubs searching around, especially in Italy, for Serge Aurier.
Yeah, I think it's Milan basically that want Aurier, and Monaco, I think, have been mentioned as well. But yeah, I think even though he's been playing quite a lot under Mourinho, they quite like to get a new right back. But for me, if you look at Tottenham's fullback situation, that's really where all the issues have stemmed from. With Trippier being allowed to go to Atletico, and then Rose being just frozen out of the team and not then sent on loan in January. Those were the two that started the Champions League final, and I think they're not. It's not an amazing combination, but they're not bad. It's certainly better what they had last season, and they really struggled in that position. So it's definitely something they need to sort out quickly. And I think Aurier's pretty good going forward, but I think he's become a bit of a calamity figure at the back for some fans. So probably time to move on if they can.
Yeah, definitely.
I think. Go on, Rich.
I was just, speaking of the Spurs, fullback situation. Who do you think would be the best suited for that role? Like, would you think they'd look to the Eredivisie and try to go for someone like Tagliafico, or maybe they do sort out that right back position and go out, searching elsewhere?
Yeah, I think he's one that's been linked to. I'm not sure where he's going to go, but I mean, it's now Jose sort of calling the shots. So I'm sure he's got his eye on somebody somewhere. But Rose said he'd quite like to play, and I wonder if with Mourinho now there, whether there might be different attitude towards him, because Rose has still got something to offer. But he might not. I mean, he's still. I mean, it's a long time since England played, but probably England's left back at the moment. I mean, Chilwell's pushing hard and has played the last couple of games actually. Thinking back, but Rose was still in and around it, so. Maybe they can sort that out. But also interesting what they're going to do with Sessegnon at Spurs, because he was a left back, and he's supposedly not even in the picture as a player as a left back now. So yeah, hopefully he can get a few more chances next year because he was a really exciting player. So
yeah. I find it's almost frustrating with Sessegnon because I mean when he played that amazing season at Fulham, obviously coming from left back and pushing forward, he had so many goal contributions. And that left wing position at Tottenham at the moment is obviously, I think, quite occupied by Son, and obviously they've got other wingers, like Bergwijn and Lucas at the club as well. Mainly right-sided, but can potentially be deployed on the left. But I think if Sessegnon wants to really break into that Tottenham team, I'd personally love to see him have a go at left back. I think it's there for the taking, especially with Danny Rose currently kind of up in the air. We're not really sure currently what his situation is, but I think Sessegnon could have a really good shot going at left back, I think.
Yeah, I just don't think Mourinho likes him as a left back, as defensively. But it could be, yeah, we'll see. It's a shame because, yeah, like I say, he was really highly rated and expected to be, this crop of youngsters that we've got. He was very much at the forefront of that. And, so let's hope he can make some progress next season.
Definitely. One of the other transfer rumours that I've seen you've posted about on your Twitter was Eze from QPR. There was a 12 million bid rejected. I wondered if you knew any more a little bit about that and maybe the circumstances around that kind of situation.
Yeah, just that's it basically. But I think we QPR are just waiting for any more bids, and Palace have been tracking him for a very long time. I know that for certain, and yeah, it'd be really exciting if Palace can get him. But then there are a lot of clubs around who want him as well. But I think that again, the main thing about the transfer market this year is, everyone isn't sure how much they've got even now. So and also, it's quite a long window. We've got till October, so things don't necessarily have to happen now. Although obviously clubs want to get players in for the small pre-season that they've got. So I think we'll see a bit of a flurry like we're seeing now at the moment, and then and also maybe a little bit after European competition's over, and then once the season starts, there'll probably be more down to a trickle, and then at the end there'll probably be a bit of a rush once things have balanced out. But yeah, in terms of Eze, I think he will move probably, but it's a waiting game. I think it's probably just. Although, it's not, Palace aren't far away from what QPR want, so you'd hope that they would maybe push the boat out. But again, they've got a very big wage bill, Palace, and I think they probably need to get rid of a couple of players before they commit to that. Like Mamadou Sakho, they'd quite like to get rid of him off the wage bill. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think a big, rumour regarding Crystal Palace has been floating around for the last couple of seasons. I thought he would have potentially got the move last year, but it's obviously Wilfried Zaha. As a guy who wears the Ivorian colours at international level as well, and a great player, I think a great servant for Crystal Palace. Having a couple of stints at the club after the what United just, in my opinion, didn't deploy him. We didn't give him the time really, but he went back to Palace and obviously did such a good job. Ed, would you say now's a good time for Zaha to maybe move on and push for that big move?
Well, I don't know if you know, I'm a Palace fan, so yeah.
Slightly sentimental.
No, not at all. I just, this is might be my main transfer interest over the last 7 years or so. Always ended the same way with him signing a new contract. But now, listen, I'd love him to go. Actually, I think that, most Palace fans would like to see him given a chance at the highest level. But the thing is, I've been saying that for the last couple of years, and we're now approaching a time where it's almost too late for him to go to the biggest level, to the highest level. Although I think he's good enough to, but he's 27 already, so and he earns a lot of money at Crystal Palace, so it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for clubs to match what he earns and pay a big transfer fee as well. Because I know there's been a lot of reports that 40 million is what Palace would take for him now. I'm not sure if that's true or not, because last summer definitely was 80 million. So yeah, I'm not sure if he's lost that much value in a year. But one thing I would say about him is I'd like to. He played okay towards the end of the season, but he didn't have his best season because he was obviously unhappy not being at the club. Not having got the move. But I would have liked. He could have done a bit more, hopefully, because Palace, were with Jordan Ayew, played quite well last season. But Zaha was not. He still Palace's best player probably at at times, but yeah, it just wasn't quite there to persuade teams to play him, to pay that much money for him, you know.
Yeah, I think again, last season. I think that was when, in my opinion, the ideal time for if he did want to progress. I think last season definitely had the opportunity there. But I feel like I think he could have still a very fruitful career staying at Palace. I think there's a bit of talk potentially around Roy Hodgson's position at Palace, and potentially I've heard maybe a couple of other managers maybe being touted. But I feel like if the Palace have a good summer, get a few other players in, I feel like that could be enough to keep him happy at the club.
What, to keep Roy Hodgson there?
I think it like
Sorry, to keep Wilf there, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. I think there's a lot of question marks about Roy himself because he's only got a year left, and the end of the season wasn't that positive because they lost 7 in a row and then drew on the last day. So, but yeah, I think Palace are at least showing, with Eze going back to him, they're showing that I think that's the right kind of profile player they want to sign. They should sign like one of the best players in the Championship. He's from South London. And just think he would fit in quite well there. But yeah, in the long term, it's hard to see with Roy Hodgson, how long he's going to go on for. So I think you hope that Palace have got somebody maybe in mind to take over from him at some point, because he can't go on forever. Although pretty much you've got a very solid chance of staying up with Roy Hodgson. I think next season is going to be quite competitive actually, because some pretty good teams coming up. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think we're in for an interesting one next season. A player that you were quite interested in, Reece, a centre mid target for Liverpool.
Someone that's been kind of rumoured to be leaving. He's not signing a new deal with Bayern Munich, and that's Thiago Alcantara. Would you see a lot of the rumours are that he is potentially Liverpool bound? Do you see that he would be a signing that Jurgen Klopp would be interested to make?
Yeah, I think he is supposed to be interested in him. I'm not sure whether they're that interested or not. Liverpool are keeping it very quiet, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did have something surprise up their sleeve, like a move, because obviously they didn't go for Werner in the end. But the thing about Alcantara is, he's a brilliant player, but I'm just not sure if it fits in with, Keita was who's somebody who's covered quite a lot in the book, my book, sorry. He was really playing well towards the end of the season and showed what all the fuss was about, why they paid so much money for him, having taken a long time to settle. So I'm not sure how that would fit in with another midfielder arriving. But yeah, we'll have to see, because he's really brilliant player. So, yeah. But yeah, like I said, I think I wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool did buy someone. I know they're looking for a defender, certainly, because Lovren has left. So. But whether it'll be sort of more experienced or somebody a bit younger, I think we'll have to find out.
Yeah, definitely. And you do raise a good point. Liverpool have got an abundance of central midfield talent. Fabinho, Henderson, Keita, Gini Wijnaldum as well. And then if they were to bring in Thiago, they'd have quite the trouble of who do they bring in. I know they want to feature Curtis Jones a lot more as well, like with him coming in through the ranks as well. So it would be quite the it would be a very sticky situation for Liverpool to be in, absolutely. And you mentioned the defensive, troubles that, not troubles per se, but replacing Lovren. We spoke earlier about Koulibaly. Do you reckon that Liverpool would be interested in going for splashing the cash on him?
Well, you never know, but I don't think so, because he's expensive.
Yeah,
and he's getting on, still really good and everything, but I think he really likes Joe Gomez as well, Klopp, doesn't he? And also Matip was a bit injured towards the end of the last season. But yeah, I think they will sign somebody young, I reckon. They've been linked with Ozan Kabak, someone I know who's working on. His agent told me that he's bona fide interest. So, but we'll see. There's a lot of other names around as well that they're supposedly looking at, the young defenders. So yeah, we'll see.
One move which was it's pretty concrete now, I'm thinking, is looking again, reported by yourself and I believe Fabrizio Romano as well, was Alexis Sanchez to Inter Milan being made pretty concrete on a permanent move now. Do you think that's a move which can benefit Inter Milan and Manchester United in the long run?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think it's interesting, actually. The move for Sanchez is basically allowing United to go to for Sancho. So similar names, but and
Yeah.
obviously, he was earning so much money at United, and it's got to be one of the big. He's a great player as well, Sancho. I don't really understand what happened at United, but he lost his hunger or whatever. But yeah, it's a big flop, really. They spent so much money on it, but at least United can say that they've got out of it with 2 years left. Unlike if you compare it to Özil at Arsenal, who's just sitting there not playing, doing anything. At least United have been proactive about it and managed to find a solution, which they've managed to lessen their loss. They've spent a lot of money on someone who's not done much for them, but he's going to move on, and that means they can bring in Sancho. And now they've got, once if Sancho arrives, and that they'll have 4 really great forwards to compete for 3 places. So, and with a couple of others in reserve. So that's a good business thing. And obviously United have the money to be able to do that. So yeah, should be quite good business. And in terms of Sanchez, who knows if he can, recapture that Arsenal form in Italy? But that's where he obviously began his career with Udinese. So maybe he still has got something left. He's not that old, really, is he? So he could be back.
I think he still does have a lot to offer. I think the Serie A definitely suits his kind of where he is in his career at the moment. I think it'll be interesting to see if he can become a regular starter at Inter Milan. But lastly, we have mentioned a couple of times before in the talk, obviously Jadon Sancho, that is the story which is definitely setting the world alight. As such a big money deal, it's always going to have a lot of coverage. I'm for one delighted. I think he's someone who I feel like there are definitely other areas that United need to work on, in my opinion. But as a young, talented, English player coming to the club, and he's set the world alight in another league, which is really, good to see as well. It's good seeing the youngsters go out and broaden their horizons a bit. But coming back to England and coming back to Manchester United, for me, I think is an incredible move. And Ed, I believe the fee that there's been a bit of discussion about the fee. Around 90 million is what I think we're looking at for now, but potentially rising up to around 120 maybe.
No, it's 90 million pounds, so 100 million euros, which is actually exactly. I just looked yesterday. It's exactly that 100 to 90 at the moment. Anyway, 20 million euros in add-ons. Well, sorry, I didn't look that up in pounds. So it's probably what is about 17 or something.
Yeah.
So, but the deal will be structured over a few years. But that's not uncommon these days. Like Arsenal with Pepe, over 4 years, I think. So it's a good deal. I think that the personal terms are still not agreed, but shouldn't be a problem. I don't know actually how much he's going to earn or anything, but it's really interesting. The dynamic of it is the most interesting thing. Though obviously talked about it. It's very exciting, but the Man City thing and the fact that he's coming back to Manchester to play for United, having walked away from City, and he's good mates with Phil Foden, who's the guy that stayed and did get the chance. So it's great, a great storyline. And also, Jadon Sancho, so talk about humble footballers. I mean, when I interviewed him last year in Dortmund with other journalists, where he seemed very humble, and hopefully he can keep that with that, massive price tag around his head and, all the attention he's going to get. But I'm sure he won't, because, he's very, again, he knows a lot about his community, and he goes back there a lot. He does a lot for his local community, which is, I'm also from South London, not too far away from where I'm from. And just, really a lot of pride, I think, in that area if he does make the move to such a big club, it'd be great for him and for England maybe as well, to have Rashford and Greenwood and Sancho playing together. Be quite good for Southgate.
Yeah, honestly, I'm loving this. It's a really exciting time to hear about it. Yeah, it's very cool, very very cool stuff. And then another one that I think me and Reece are quite vested in as well. We're very interested to see what happens with him is Ben Chilwell. There's a lot of talk around Chilwell. I think again, him and Rose have been kind of England's more prominent left backs, I think, but Chilwell, in my opinion, is potentially rising, just fighting for that starting spot for England now. We're hearing all sorts of fees, but we're hearing Chelsea are the club that are interested.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, as far as I know, I don't know much about that one, but I know that they're interested. But Leicester, you saw with remember the Mahrez affair and how long it took them took City to get him, and wanted to go on strike and things. And Leicester want big money. Maguire, look at Maguire. They want, and indeed we mentioned they want big money for players because it's selling to a rival now, isn't it? They're up there. So I imagine I don't know, but I imagine they want a lot of money for him. So, but Chelsea seems to have some money. So who knows? But you'd have thought that Lampard would be wanting to make at least one defensive signing, having signed all these forward players or midfielders.
Yeah, I was going to say, so far Chelsea, attack-wise, they are looking quite terrifying. I think they've signed a lot of people, and obviously still rumoured interest for Kai Havertz as well, which isn't confirmed, but there's definitely interest there. Do you see that one going over the line?
I think it's not done yet, but I mean they're expecting to buy him. So, but we'll see if it gets done, because it's kind of going. The longer things go on, I suppose, the more doubt there is over them. But then at the same time, there's a lot, it's just so busy at the moment. There's matches Leverkusen have got to play in the Europa League. I think they want him to play in the Europa League if possible. So it might delay things a little bit with that one. Yeah,
but potentially, so much exciting stuff to come. Ed, thank you so much for being on this week's podcast. It has been absolutely fantastic having you on.
No worries. Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.
And we will, of course, be linking Ed's information in the bio below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It would mean an awful lot to us. You can check us out on our Twitter at Pundits Average, on Instagram at The Average Pundits. We have a Facebook page as well. You can like and get information on there as well. And if you want to ever contact us about coming on the podcast, we are The Average Pundits at outlook.com. As always, Reece, again, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me once again. As always, thank you so much to Ed for joining us today. And make sure you go and get Made in Africa. Fantastic book, fantastic read for anybody who is interested in football in general.
Brilliant. And we will see you guys next time.